Hello and welcome to Tuesday's training. It being Tuesday, we are here inside the Kandoo Equine online training. We're not quite, but we will be in a minute. If you go to my library, that will come up and invite you to sign in, which I should have probably done earlier. Right, and then of course you'll find your courses that you have here, and we're going to go into the horse training course today to talk about alternatives to the tree of knowledge. Now, yesterday we talked about the tree of knowledge and how people sometimes tie horses up to the tree of knowledge in order to teach certain things, and quite often it's patience. They think the horse needs to learn patience, and so they tie it up alone somewhere out at a post, and they assume that the horse is learning patience out there all on its own, which I don't think is ever going to be true. And we discussed yesterday that that is actually a form of punishment. So we're actually punishing the horse by doing that. I also find it quite so interesting that we think that the horse has to spend hours tied up to understand not to move when it's tied up. So under normal circumstances, I mean, you know, I rode 4 horses this morning, and each one I brought in, I don't tie up to saddle up or anything, so they were saddled up standing there, but then I did tie each one up to hose it afterwards, so they spent probably 5 to 10 minutes tied up. Why a horse would ever need to spend an hour or 2 hours or however long they get tied to the tree of knowledge, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what the horse is supposed to be learning then when it is tied up for that length of time. Yesterday we said, you know, if it's being punished for being naughty when ridden, so if it bucked when it was ridden, if it's then later tied up, it's obviously not going to connect those two things. I also think that the horses don't learn well at all when they're alone. And I think it's very hard to teach a horse something when you're not actually there. So, I mean, it makes sense, it doesn't, when you say it like that. But horses don't work things out for themselves. You have to actually be there to train them. And I was reminded of this the other day when I saw a photograph on Facebook. Let me just go back to the page before. I saw a photograph on Facebook of all these actually beautifully bred Australian stock horses, and they were all standing in an indoor arena together, and just the horses, no humans there, just the horses, and they all had their bits tied to their saddles, so they were in, you know, what you might call a round frame, like the horse at the top of the page here, but they weren't being ridden. These horses were unstarted, so they'd tied, like you can see here, they'd actually tied the bit to the saddle, and this was supposed to teach the horse about, I assume, traveling in frame and that sort of thing. Now, the problem is it's not going to teach the horse anything useful at all. All it's going to do is punish the horse. Now, why is it punishment and not negative reinforcement? Because we're using pressure, so surely it's negative reinforcement. But the whole idea of negative reinforcement is that the pressure is removed. If you're not with the horse, you can't teach it with negative reinforcement because you can't remove the pressure. So here, you know, in video number 4, which is a question I often get asked, because you know, you'll only ever see me ride a horse that is round and in frame and is soft in the bridle. And this is why, because this is how I get relaxation. This is how I get the horse into the engagement zone. And it's a big question, how much pressure do I need? And the point of that is that we have to be really aware of how much pressure we're using, because we want to make it less and less and less every time we pick up pressure. If you tie the horse into a position in the same way as if you're riding the horse by holding it in the front, then you're going to need increasing amounts of pressure to get the same result over time. The reason being that the horse desensitizes to that pressure. So if today I go out and I teach this, you know, nice give to the bit lesson, and my horse, you know, let's say I need 10 newtons of pressure to get the horse into that position and to get the horse to give and be soft in the bridle. If I hold that 10 newtons of pressure, tomorrow I'm going to need 11 because I will have desensitized the horse to 10 newtons. So those stock horses that were standing in the indoor stable, in the indoor arena with their noses tied to their saddles, they are going to need a lot more pressure to get a response later because they're going to have desensitized to that amount because that pressure hasn't been released. So they might be able to automatically release it themselves, but as soon as those horses get tired, which they're going to because they haven't developed these muscles yet, then they're just going to lean on it and be increasingly desensitized to that pressure. So I think it's very important that we realize that the horse isn't going to learn anything we want it to know unless we're there to teach it. And, you know, I think if you haven't got the time to spend with your horse, then just leave it in the paddock, because by tying it to the tree of knowledge, you're going to do much more harm than good. So let's say you have 10 minutes that you can actually spend with your horse. Well, great. I mean, you can teach a lot in 10 minutes. Go to something like this. Go to the stops module and say, right, okay, I've got 10 minutes with this horse. I'm going to pop the bridle on and I'm going to teach it how to stop, like, really well, so that when I ride and when I, want to stop, I can say whoa to the horse just quietly, and the horse is going to come to a stop. And that is a really, really useful thing. And it won't take you more than 10 minutes. Another really fun thing to teach, if you've got 10 or maybe 15 minutes, is this hips to the fence lesson. I know a lot of you have already taught that, but it's a great little lesson. And it doesn't take long, and it's so good because you can, it gives you so many things. It gives you the horse that stands really quietly by the mounting block for mounting. This horse here at the top here, Romeo, actually just had his first ride, and I spent a lot longer on this lesson with Romeo because he was very nervous about having me above him. There's a couple of videos in here for you. This is Romeo, this one here, which was taken quite recently. And he just did need that little bit extra. You can see there, his head's still quite high. But if ever I had 5 minutes with Romeo that I had spare, I would take him to the mounting block and I'd do this, and I'd be above him, and I'd get him used to that and get him used to the feeling of my weight on him. And, today I had the first ride, and of course it was absolutely perfect. He was relaxed, he was calm, all those things, because I'd used that time that I had. I hadn't just tied him up and left him. I'd actually been really proactive about every minute of time that I had that I could spend with this particular horse. And it's absolutely paid dividends in the end. And I encourage you to do that. If you ever don't know what to teach, just come in here and browse through and say, oh, I know, why don't I have a look at hindquarter control? Perhaps I could spend my 10 minutes on starting this. And you could start with lesson 1, disengaging the hindquarter on the ground. Once you've done that, perhaps next week you could go and you could start riding the 20-meter circle of hindquarter control. Don't waste it. Don't throw it away, because we get such limited time with our horses. I know if anyone, said to you, would you like to have more time with your horses? The answer would be yes. So when you do have the time, I encourage you to use it. And that's all from me today. Thank you very much for being with me. And I will see you tomorrow on Hump Day. Bye.